Now at 7, from Miami to New York, we watched in real time as Miami-Dade County School Superintendent Alberto Carvalho worked through an internal conflict.
He ultimately decided to stay put here in South Florida, backing out on a deal to take the position of New York City Schools Chancellor.
Superintendent Carvalho joins us now in the studio, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Appreciate the
I want
opportunity.
to get your reaction before we start to the news out of Tallahassee that this gun legislation, this historic piece of legislation, has passed and is now on its way to the governor's desk for his signature. What do you think?
Congratulations to all those who advocated for at least some degree of gun control. I think raising the age limit for the purchase of these types of weapons is a step in the right direction. Very strong investment in mental health counselors in schools and in communities. Right decision to hire additional school resource officers. And also, to a certain extent, a strong message to the kids, particularly in Parkland, that their voice was heard. And some of them will be disappointed that the bill doesn't go far enough in terms of absolutely outlawing the types of assault weapons that cause the type of destruction in that school. But at least their voice was heard. There's some degree of vindication. So I am happy with the fact that the bill passed. Obviously, we'll have a local conversation about whether or not we'll take advantage of some aspects of the bill, specifically the Marshall program.
You'll have the option to opt in or to opt out. Which way are you leaning?
Well, Rick, in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, we have a very unique situation. We have a school board police department. We are one of 3 school districts that actually has a fully deputized, certified police department. They are fully armed, they are trained, they are experts in law enforcement. So I prefer, and I believe my board prefers, that a law enforcement entity be present at every one of our schools. With this additional investment, we'll be able to reach that guarantee. Right now, we have an officer in every secondary school, middle and senior high schools. I am not in favor necessarily of training individuals who are not law enforcement and deploying them into schools with a concealed weapons permit. And there's a reason why not. Number one, the vast majority of chiefs of police I've spoken with, including our own and local chiefs of police, mayors, and educators themselves, teachers, don't want it. It is a challenge for law enforcement. If there is an active shooter situation, they want to go in knowing that the guy with the gun is probably the bad guy. When they have to now make a decision about whether or not that is a good person or an intruder, it is a challenge. Secondly, teachers don't want to be tasked with that additional responsibility. They want to be armed with resources, better pay, and respect. And I think we owe them that.
All right, let's talk about what happened last week. Let's talk about the way that you turned down the job offer in New York City and that school board meeting that everybody watched on television. In hindsight, do you think it was the right way to handle it? Would you have done it differently?
If I had a chance to rewrite history, I probably would have done it differently. But as I've told the community, I went into that board meeting, quite frankly, with the idea of going to New York. And as the meeting started, after reading many text messages, emails, calls from the community, being approached by parents, students, teachers, local leaders, and as the meeting unfolded, the emotional outpouring of support really did touch me. Now, I did have some concerns, some last-minute concerns going to that meeting, but I was still committed to going to New York. And the concerns were specific to, would I have the latitude to fully exercise the work of a superintendent or chancellor in New York City based on some late-minute revelations from the leadership in New York. You put that together with the outpouring of support and the great community that we represent, and then all of a sudden, the decision became much easier. Simply put, my heart spoke louder than my mind.
Okay, it was a big day, very eventful for us in the news business as well. Let's talk about the Dreamers. You mentioned that some DACA recipients were part of your reason for staying, that
Yes.
they touched your heart. You came as an overstayed a visa or came as
Correct.
undocumented when you were young. And you've also said publicly that no one would be removing Dreamers unless it was over your dead body. But how much authority do you really have if the day comes when federal immigration authorities come to remove students? Are you giving them a false sense of security in the school
I hope
system?
I'm not. I hope that this community will stand with us in protecting these very vulnerable kids. It would be a shame for them to feel that they need to recess back into a dark corner and stand in the shadow of society. So I see myself as a protector of their rights. Immigration status is not something we look at when we enroll kids in schools. It is a right for them to be educated. And I don't stand alone. This is a community of immigrants. And I don't think we can hold a child who was brought to this country at the age of 2 responsible for the actions of his or her parents. So this is rationally the right thing to do. It is the humane thing to do. In my opinion, it is the legal thing to do.
But how would you actually enforce that? How would you prevent that from happening?
Well, unless there is a subpoena to enter a school, my police department, every single principal is on notice to not allow any one person, regardless of rank, regardless of the authority they carry, to come into our schools and take any type of action against our kids, specifically federal immigration action.
Are you setting yourself up to run for office here in Miami-Dade County, possibly mayor?
Elliot, for years, honestly, for years, that's been asked of me. And let me dispel that myth. I've been asked about a congressional run. I've been asked about the mayoral run twice in the past. It's not in the cards for me. I am a professional educator. I cannot predict the future, but I can tell you, for those who themselves have every right and aspiration of running for those positions, I'm not going to be your competitor. I am the superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. I did not turn down this dream job in New York City, the most powerful educational position as far as superintendent in the country, to then renege on my commitment to kids. I recognize that I broke a commitment to adults, to live up and honor a commitment to children, and I am absolutely dead set on fulfilling that commitment. We have graduation rates to continue to improve, a bond to implement, safe schools to ensure for our kids and the teachers and the parents, and my commitment now and into the future is exactly that.
We appreciate having you. Thanks for
making the time.
Thank
you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you very much.